Secrets sit quiet in parish rooms. The parish rooms of Street Mary Mead buzzed low, chairs scraped, papers shuffled, murmurs carried in the hall. Miss Marple sat in the third row, her shawl pulled close, her eyes clear, watchful. She never missed details. Beside her, Dolly Bantry leaned forward. Her green dress rustled. "Arthur has promised revelations tonight," she whispered. Her rings flashed as she adjusted her gloves. "Revelations about the accounts, about the roof fund." Marple nodded slowly. Her fingers rested on her knitting bag. She never hurried words. Her eyes stayed on the front. The platform carried 3 figures. Arthur Penrith, the treasurer, his brown box hugged tight under one arm. He placed it carefully on the table. A velvet cloth covered the surface. Odd choice. Thick, dark, neatly hemmed. Next, Mrs. Iris Lane, honorary secretary. Navy suit, iron grey hair pinned firm. Her papers lined straight before her, every page squared. Her fingers quick, precise. At the side, young Victor Dale, the electrician, cap pushed back, hands stained with work. He checked a socket, then ducked behind the curtains. Dolly leaned closer. "He handles the wires. Clever but careless sometimes." A loud laugh burst through the doorway. Paul Cartwright, the publican, red-faced, broad hands, booming voice. "Nothing like a raffle to stir the crowd." Arthur's eyes narrowed, his voice cut thin. "Tonight, Paul, we deal in truth." The Reverend Clement entered with Griselda. Dr. Haydock followed, heavy frame settling into a chair. Each villager found place. Each waited. But not for raffle prizes. For something heavier. Mrs. Lane rang her brass bell. 3 sharp notes. The room stilled. Arthur stood tall, his hand on the box. His other brushed the velvet edge. He cleared his throat. "My friends, neighbors, fellow trustees." His voice rose in the hall. "Tonight, I shall give a full statement." Dolly whispered fast. "He means to accuse. Here, in public. Can you believe it?" Marple's eyes shifted to the cloth again, the hem, the fold. For a moment she thought she saw a glint, a fine stitch line. Then it vanished in the light. Arthur looked across the rows. Faces waited, his lips pressed firm. "You deserve honesty. You shall have it." His fingers tapped the box. Once, twice, each sound heavy. The crowd leaned in. Mrs. Lane's lips pressed tighter. Victor reappeared, wiping his hands. Cartwright muttered, "Let him get on with it." Arthur drew breath. He raised his chin. His voice steadied. "For too long, matters have been left unclear. Tonight, all will be plain." Marple watched. Still, silent. Her eyes dropped to the velvet hem again. Her hand brushed her shawl. Her thoughts turned. Odd cloth, odd stitch. Too neat, too deliberate. Arthur placed both hands flat on the table. He leaned forward. His voice sharpened. "Tonight, the truth comes out." The box clicked as he opened the lock. Truth chokes those who fear it. Arthur Penrith stood firm. His hand pressed the velvet cloth, the other on his box. His eyes bright with tension, he began, "My friends, the time has come." His voice carried across the hall. "You will hear." The words stopped. His jaw trembled. He coughed. A sharp, sudden cough. He staggered. His hand gripped the edge of the table. The velvet cloth shifted under his weight. He gasped. His lips moved soundless. Then a choking noise filled the room. Dolly Bantry clutched Marple's arm. "Jane, what's happening?" Her fan dropped to the floor. Arthur's face flushed red, then turned grey. His knees buckled. The box slid sideways. Papers scattered. The lock snapped open. Gasps filled the hall. Chairs scraped back. Voices rose high. "Fetch the doctor. Water. Get water." Dr. Haydock pushed forward. "Stand clear," he barked. His heavy hands pulled Arthur flat. He bent low, fingers at the pulse, ear to the chest. The room froze. Every breath waited. Griselda Clement covered her mouth. Paul Cartwright whispered, "It's his heart. Too much worry." Haydock's face tightened. He shook his head. Too late. He's gone. A sharp cry came from the back. Mrs. Lane stood still, her hand on her papers, her lips pale, her eyes locked on the fallen man. Victor Dale stepped from behind the curtain, his hands dirty with dust. His voice shook. "I checked the wires. All safe. I swear it." Slack arrived, coat swinging, boots heavy. His voice cut through. "Right then. Nobody leaves. Nobody touches a thing. This is a sudden death. Until I say otherwise. This hall is a crime scene." The murmurs rose again. "What crime?" Cartwright snapped. "Poor Arthur. Drop dead, that's all." Slack's eyes narrowed. "Drop dead? Perhaps, but perhaps not." Marple sat still, her hands folded neat on her shawl. She did not rush forward. She only watched. Her eyes on Arthur's hand, the fingers curled stiff. On the palm, a mark. Small, dark, like a burn. She leaned slightly, careful not to draw attention. The smell reached her. Sharp, strange, not sickness, not perfume. Something faint, something metallic. Haydock frowned as he rose. "There's a trace here. Odd. Very odd." Slack bent near. "What is it?" "Not sure. Not the heart, I think. There's something else." Marple glanced once more at the velvet cloth. Her finger brushed the hem as Dolly pulled her close. A sting pricked her skin. Fine. Thin. Almost invisible. She drew her hand back slowly, her fingertip red. Not cut deep, but touched by something sharp. She pressed her shawl to it. Dolly whispered quick, "Jane, what is it?" Marple shook her head, her eyes fixed on the cloth again, her mind turning. Thread. Velvet. A burn on a palm. Pieces not yet clear. The hall, echoed with whispers. Slack stood tall, his notebook open. "Until I know cause of death, everyone stays. This is no accident," Marple whispered under her breath. "Then someone planned this. Poison hides in habits." The hall stayed silent now. Arthur lay still. Dr. Haydock had covered the face with his handkerchief. Inspector Slack snapped his notebook shut. "Right," he said loud. "No one moves. Not until I've seen everything." Paul Cartwright growled. "Inspector, you don't mean murder?" "The man dropped dead, that's all." Slack glared. "You'll wait until I decide what it island." Miss Marple leaned slightly forward. Her eyes shifted from the body to the table. The brown box open, papers scattered. Beside it, a glass half empty. A jug of water near the edge. She lifted her shawl higher, her gaze fixed on the rim of the glass. Faint powder clung inside. Not sugar, not dust. Something finer. Dolly whispered quick, "Jane, why stare at that jug?" He only drank water. Marple's lips pressed tight. She did not answer. Her eyes studied the spout. A grain caught the light. Slack moved closer. "What is it, Miss Marple?" She said nothing, only tilted her head toward the jug. Haydock bent low. He sniffed the water. His face creased. Unpleasant smell. Bitter. Victor Dale shifted nervously near the curtain. I filled the glasses. Only water from the pump, nothing more. Mrs. Lane's voice cut firm. The jug belongs to the Parish cupboard. I fetched it myself. Marple's needles clicked once, her fingers slow, her eyes still on Mrs. Lane. That calm voice. Too calm. Slack scribbled. You say you fetched it, Mrs. Lane? Yes, I always do. Her hands folded neat on the agenda papers, her nails clean, her posture stiff. Cartwright's voice rumbled low. Perhaps he choked. Perhaps it was meat pie at supper. But no one listened. Eyes stayed on the jug. Marple's. Hand brushed the velvet cloth again. She felt the stitch line at the hem. Thin, tight, her fingertips still sore from the prick. A whisper rose at her side. Dolly again. Jane, that cloth. It doesn't belong here. I've never seen it used before. Marple gave the smallest nod. Her thoughts turned. Velvet, jug, powder, each detail small. Together, not small at all. Slack lifted the glass with his handkerchief. Doctor, see this? Haydock nodded. Residue on the inside. We'll need to test. The room stirred. Villagers whispered sharp. Murder? Not in Street Mary Mead. God save us. Slack barked. Silence. His pencil scratched again. He turned to Marple. You saw something? She shook her head slightly. Not yet, she said. Her tone soft, but her eyes sharp. Mrs. Lane shuffled her papers. Inspector, I assure you, everything was in order. Nothing out of place. Her words clipped, too rehearsed. Marple pressed her hand against the cloth once more. She felt the thread again. A faint smell clung to her fingertip. Bitter, sharp, not dust, not sugar, something darker. Dolly touched her arm. Jane, you're pale. What is it? Marple's voice low. Nothing. Yet. Slack pointed at the jug. This will go for testing. Until then, no one leaves. Marple looked at her finger, red where the stitch had pricked her, and whispered, It begins with the cloth. A stitch can kill as surely as a knife. Miss Marple leaned forward. Her eyes stayed on the velvet hem. The cloth lay smooth across the table. Edges folded, seams neat, corners exact. She touched it once more. Her finger brushed the stitch. A faint sting returned. Thin, sharp, hidden in the fold. She pinched lightly. A thread lifted. Fine, taut, almost invisible. She held it to the light. It gleamed faintly. Not ordinary cotton. Dolly whispered quick. Jane, what are you doing? It's just decoration. Marple shook her head, her voice low. Not quite. Slack stepped closer. Leave that cloth, Miss Marple. We've bigger matters. His tone brisk. His notebook slapped against his palm. Marple's fingers wrapped the thread in her handkerchief. She set it quiet in her knitting bag. Her eyes did not leave the table. Dr. Haydock bent near the treasurer's body. His voice carried low. There's a mark on the palm. Not just heart failure. Some burn. Faint but clear. He sniffed again. Ozone and almonds. Slack frowned. Almonds? Bitter smell, Haydock said. Not food. Not medicine either. Victor Dale blurted, nervous. I checked the sockets. Nothing connected except the hall lights. Nothing else. His hands shook as he spoke. His eyes darted to Mrs. Lane. She stood stiff. Her papers clutched. Her voice clipped. The decorations were arranged hours ago. Everything proper. Everything in order. Marple tilted her head. She studied the secretary. Every word precise. Every gesture exact. No tremor. No panic. Dolly muttered again. She always speaks like that. Like a machine. Cold. The velvet hem brushed Marple's shawl again. She caught the faint, bitter scent. Not dust. Not polish. Something else. Cartwright's voice cut through. All this talk of threads and cloth. The man choked on his nerves, that's all. Slack ignored him. He tapped his pencil. Burn on a hand. Smell in the air. Thread in the cloth. Odd mix. Marple's needles clicked once. Her voice stayed mild. Odd things together. Make sense, Inspector. Later. Slack grunted. Later then. For now, we check the box. Perhaps the truth lies in the papers. He bent to gather the scattered sheets. Marple's gaze sharpened. Arthur's handwriting covered a note. The ink dark. The words hurried. Her lips moved as she read. Lane must pay. She folded the paper back. Her face stayed calm, but her thoughts turned fast. Thread hidden. Powder in water. Burn on skin. A note naming Lane. Dolly's breath quickened. Jane, what did you see? Marple whispered low. Nothing for now. Slack snapped the box shut. Everything sealed. We proceed step by step. Marple adjusted her shawl. Her eyes lingered on Mrs. Lane. Calm face. Steady hands. Too steady. As if she had already prepared her answers. Marple whispered to herself, Someone stitched death into this cloth. Salt preserves food, or covers death. Mrs. Tripp entered, apron stiff. Her hands red from years of scrubbing. She sniffed, sharp. Her eyes scanned the hall with disapproval. I cleaned this room yesterday, she said. Spotless, not a speck wrong. Her chin lifted high. No one ever complained of my flaws. Inspector Slack nodded. Then perhaps you'll explain this. He pointed near the table legs. A faint dust shone in the light. Mrs. Tripp bent low. Her finger rubbed it. Her nose twitched. Salt, she said flat. Salt where it doesn't belong. The room stirred. Salt? On the floor? Voices rose with curiosity. Marple leaned forward. Her eyes followed the faint line round the table. Not scattered. Not random. A circle. Deliberate. Mrs. Tripp muttered again. I never use salt. Never. It leaves bloom on linoleum. Ruins shine. Always soap. Always elbow grease. Slack jotted quick. And this bucket? He pointed at a galvanized pail by the stage. Mrs. Tripp sniffed louder. Not mine. All my buckets. Blue enamel. 15 years. Same set. Never had a galvanized one. Doctor. Haydock bent near the bucket. He wrinkled his nose. Smells peculiar. Not plain water. He dipped a cloth. Dried crystals clung white. Marple stepped closer. Her voice soft. Salt water. With soda, perhaps. Haydock nodded. Yes. Salt solution. Strong conductor. Victor Dale swallowed hard. I had nothing to do with it. I was at the pub supper before the meeting. Half the village saw me. His face pale, his hands restless. Mrs. Lane spoke cold. I arrived at 6. The floor was clean. Decorations ready. Nothing amiss. Her eyes stayed on Slack, her tone steady. Marple's gaze lowered to the coconut matting under the table. Edges dark, still damp, as if something had soaked in recently. Her fingers traced the pattern. A tide mark, she murmured. Dr. Haydock leaned near. What's that, Miss Marple? The damp forms a ring. Not accident. Someone placed liquid here. Round the table. Round his feet. Slack crouched, touched the mark. His eyes narrowed. Looks deliberate. But why salt water? Marple's needles clicked once in her bag, her thoughts turning. Salt water meant conduction. Conduction meant current. Arthur's hand bore a burn. The smell of ozone lingered. Dolly whispered fast. Jane, you think he stood in it? That Arthur's shoes touched this? Marple's lips tightened. Her eyes stayed on the floor. The mark pressed deep into leather. Yes, he had stood in salt water when he died. Slack rose heavy. Then someone prepared this. Not accident, not chance. A trap. Mrs. Tripp crossed her arms. Not me. I'd never leave salt on a floor. Never. Marple looked again at the velvet hem. Her fingertip tingled where the thread had pricked her. Salt on the floor, thread in the cloth, burn on a palm. Pieces clicked, but not complete, not yet. Marple whispered to herself. He was standing in salt when death found him. Metal burns leave silent proof. Dr. Haydock bent over the body again. His heavy hand turned Arthur's palm. He pointed with a blunt finger. There. Look closer. Inspector Slack crouched beside him. What am I meant to see? Haydock grunted. Not natural. This mark here. Small, dark, scorched. The villagers leaned in. Dolly gasped. It looks like a burn. Griselda clutched the Reverend's arm. Her voice trembled. But how could fire touch him at a parish table? Haydock shook his head. Not fire. Heat. Current. More like. He raised the hand further. The gold ring on Arthur's finger gleamed faintly. Its edge blackened. Slack frowned. Ring scorched. Palm scarred. You're saying electricity? Haydock's nod was slow. Possible. Salt water. Wire. Ring as conductor. Victor Dale stepped back quick, his face pale. I never wired this table. I swear on my trade. All I checked was the lighting. That's all. Cartwright barked loud. Electric shocks? Rubbish. He died of worry. That's it. Slack silenced him with a glare. Marple leaned slightly forward, her eyes calm, her mind sharp. Salt water ring on the floor. Thread in the velvet hem. A burn on the palm. A scorched ring, each small. Together not small. Dolly whispered near her ear. Jane, this is unnatural. Wires in bunting, salt water, burned rings. Who could think of such things? Marple pressed her lips. Her needles stayed still. Her thoughts turned inward. Mrs. Lane spoke cold. The treasurer often looked unwell. He worried too much. Perhaps the doctor mistakes. Her words neat, clipped. Her eyes gave nothing. Haydock stood firm. I don't mistake a burn. This man touched live current. That ring took part of it. Slack tapped his pencil against the notebook. So, wire, current, salt, a trap. But where's the wire? Where's the source? Someone here knows. Eyes turned to Victor Dale. His hands shook. He stammered quick. I told you. No extra wires. Only decorations. Nothing else. Marple looked back at the velvet cloth, the hem heavy, the thread sharp. She remembered the sting in her finger. A fine glimmer of copper, perhaps. Not cotton, she whispered, barely sound. Decoration hides truth. Always. Dolly caught her words. What did you say, Jane? Marple shook her head. Not yet. Not all of it. Slack paced heavy steps across the hall. His boots echoed. His brows tight. Proof. I need proof. Without wire, without source, it's nothing but guessing. Haydock crossed his arms. Proof lies in the details. The hand, the ring. Look close. Marple folded her shawl tighter. Her eyes returned to Mrs. Lane. Still calm. Too calm. Hands neat. Nails clean. A woman who stitched, always precise. The villagers murmured, nervous. Some whispered prayer. Some muttered fear. Marple sat silent. Her mind collected every clue. Each piece fit into habit. Someone's habit. Someone in this room. Marple's eyes fixed on the velvet hem, and she whispered, the wire must be there. Decoration is disguise. Inspector Slack barked orders. Search the platform. Every corner. Every fold. Victor Dale hesitated. I told you. Nothing but ribbon and cloth. Slack's eyes narrowed. Then prove it. Show me. The villagers leaned close. Eyes wide, voices low. Curiosity louder than fear now. Marple moved slow. Her hand brushed the velvet edge again. Her eyes traced the line of ribbon running across the table. Bright red. Neat bows. Too neat. She pinched one knot. It felt wrong. She tugged gently. The ribbon stiffened, not fabric soft. Something inside. Something hidden. "Inspector," Marple said softly. Slack turned, impatient. "Yes, Miss Marple?" She lifted the ribbon toward the light. The fabric peeled slightly. A glimmer showed. Thin, copper, threaded inside. Gasps echoed through the hall. Dolly clutched her pearls. Oh, heavens! It was sewn into the ribbon. Victor stepped back. His hands rose. "Not me. I'd never stitch wire into bunting. Never," Slack snapped. "Quiet. You'll speak when I ask." Haydock bent close. His thick fingers traced the exposed piece. He muttered low. "Insulated here. Stripped at the end. Enough to carry current." Marple stayed, calm. Her eyes followed the ribbon as it trailed down, across the table edge, toward the floor. She leaned, shawl brushing the stage. The ribbon ended in a coil, not loose, not random, fastened to metal. Slack crouched. He tugged the end. The coil clung to the radiator valve. Scratches marked the brass. A green stain of corrosion showed. "Good Lord," Dolly whispered. They tied it to the heating pipe. Haydock's brows furrowed. That would ground it. Pass a charge through the salt water, right into the man's body. Slack's jaw tightened. So it was murder. Planned neat. Wire hidden in ribbons. Cloth to hide joins. Salt water round his feet. Damn clever. The villagers whispered sharp. Who could do such a thing? In our parish. God protect us. Mrs. Lane's voice cut through, cold. Anyone could have placed it. The hall is never locked. Even children play here after school. Her hands remained steady. Her papers stacked neat. Marple's eyes rested on her. Too quick an answer. Too polished. A woman ready for every question. Victor shook his head. "I worked sockets only. No wire like this came from me. That's not my hand." Slack eyed him hard. "Maybe. Maybe not. We'll see." Marple leaned closer to Dolly, her whisper barely sound. This was stitched, not tied. Someone who worked with thread. Someone who never left loose ends. Dolly stared at her. "Jane, you don't mean—" Marple lifted a hand. "Not yet, but soon." Slack pulled the ribbon free. The wire rattled against the radiator valve. The sound sharp. Final. Marple whispered under her breath. Death was sewn into these ribbons. Heat carries more than warmth. Inspector Slack knelt near the radiator. His torch beam ran across the valve. Scratches lined the brass. Fresh. Not from years of use. Haydock crouched beside him. He touched the green stain. Corrosion flaked under his thumb. "Copper against brass," he muttered. "Current passed here." Slack tugged the wire again. It clinked against the metal, the sound sharp in the silence. He looked back at the hall. Someone meant this to carry power. Straight through the floor, through the salt water, into him. Gasps rose. Shocking him, like an execution. "Lord help us," Cartwright growled. "Too clever for villagers. No one here plans traps like that." His voice carried scorn, but doubt edged his tone. Marple's eyes lowered. Her gaze traced the wire's path. From ribbon, down cloth, to valve, to salt circle, to shoes, to ring, to hand, every step deliberate. Not one wasted. She whispered almost to herself. Someone who stitched with care. Dolly heard her. She gripped her sleeve. Jane, who could stitch wire like embroidery. Marple pressed her lips. Her eyes flicked once toward Mrs. Lane, but she gave no answer. Slack straightened, his face dark. Damn clever work. Not clumsy. Neat. Hidden. Took time. Took skill. He snapped his notebook shut. Means this was no accident. This was murder, arranged stitch by stitch. Victor Dale raised his hands. Not mine, Inspector. My work leaves twists, not stitches. This is sewing, not wiring. His voice cracked. I know copper when I see it. This was stitched in with needle and thread. The room stirred again. Eyes darted toward Mrs. Lane. Her face calm, her hands neat on the desk. She said nothing. Haydock wiped his palms. The man stood in brine. The wire carried charge. The ring finished the path. Death came quick. He shook his head. Precise. Cold. Slack grunted. So precise we'd never see it without a pricked finger. His eyes flicked to Marple. You saw first, didn't you? The thread in the cloth. Marple nodded once, her voice even. It was meant to look harmless. Velvet hides sharpness well. Dolly whispered fast. Jane, it frightens me. Anyone could sit here. Any of us could be tricked. Marple's eyes sharpened. No, not anyone. It was meant for Arthur. Only him. The villagers fell quiet. Her words struck heavy. Targeted death. Not chance. Slack folded his arms. Then we ask, who wanted him gone? Who had skill to stitch wire neat? Who had time in this hall? No one answered. Silence thick. Only the wire rattled against the valve. A sound like warning. Marple sat back. Her fingers folded her shawl close. Her mind turned the pieces again. Salt, wire, stitch, burn, all habits, all from careful hands. She whispered low. Someone stitched death by hand. Paper speaks even when mouths lie. Reverend Clement rose slowly. His hands shook as he lifted a thin folder. Inspector, he said, voice quiet. These are the parish minutes, carbon copies, filed each month. Slack took the folder. He flipped through pages. Old ink, carbon smudges, neat headings. Marple's eyes stayed on Mrs. Lane. Her fingers never left her own papers. Clean, fresh, typed sharp on white. Too sharp, too recent. Slack handed one sheet to Marple. Compare, if you will. She set the two side by side. Her spectacles slid down her nose. Her eyes narrowed. The old carbon read, meeting closed at 9 o'clock. The typed sheet read, meeting closed at 9 o'clock. Treasurer to settle pub loan privately. Marple lifted her head, her voice mild. One line added. Gasps filled the hall. Dolly whispered fierce. Pub loan? What loan? Cartwright blustered red. Nothing of the kind. Lies. Slack's brow furrowed. Mrs. Lane, you typed this. She straightened. Yes, as I always do. Perhaps an error crept in. Marple studied her. Errors rarely creep in, Mrs. Lane. You are too precise for slips. Lane's lips pressed thin. I typed late. Tired, perhaps. A slip of the keys. Dolly shook her head. She never. Slips. Never in 20 years. Her whisper sharp in Marple's ear. Victor Dale scratched his neck. Why add that line? Who gains from it? Cartwright exploded. Not me. I never borrowed parish money. Ask anyone. His voice loud, hands wide, but sweat dampened his brow. Slack's pencil tapped his notebook. A false line, planted. Either to smear Cartwright, or to shield another. Which is it, Mrs. Lane? Her reply came flat. Clerical mistake. Nothing more. Marple's eyes drifted back to the ribbon wire. Neat stitches. Deliberate. Now a neat line on paper. Also deliberate. She whispered soft. Habits repeat. Thread or type, always precise. Dolly caught her words. What do you mean, Jane? Marple only shook her head. Haydock folded his arms. Forgery. That's what it island. You don't accidentally add loans. Slack snapped the folder shut. We'll hold both copies. The court will judge. Lane's eyes flicked once toward the velvet cloth, then back to her papers. Her face calm. Too calm. The villagers whispered sharp. Forgery. She typed it herself. What else did she change? Marple gathered her shawl. Her voice remained steady. Paper speaks, but so do hands. These hands leave no stray marks. Slack turned on her. You suspect her? Marple's eyes stayed firm. I observe habits. That is all. Silence dropped heavy again. The wire glinted in the ribbon. The damp floor still dark with salt. The forged line sat bold on paper. Marple whispered, Someone typed death into these minutes. Money stains even the Bible. Dolly Bantry fidgeted on her chair. Her hands restless. Her eyes wandered. She picked up the Parish Bible from the side table. The cover cracked as she opened it. A slip of paper slid free. It fluttered down to the floor. Dolly gasped. Jane, look! She bent quick, picked it up. A folded cheque. Slack snatched it. His eyes scanned. Fast. To Arthur Penrith. Amount £50. Signed by Arthur Penrith himself. The room stirred. Gasps. Murmurs. Signed himself? For himself? Impossible. Slack's jaw set firm. So the treasurer paid the treasurer. That's embezzlement, plain as day. Cartwright's face reddened. Lies. He was framing me with that false line in the minutes. Now look, it's him stealing. Reverend Clement raised a shaking hand. We trusted him. Trusted him with every penny. Dolly clutched Marple's sleeve. Jane, does this mean Arthur stole? That he was guilty all along? Marple's head tilted. Her eyes traced the signature again. Neat. Too neat. Not the uneven hand of a dying man. She whispered soft. Forged hand. Forged line. Both from habit. Dolly stared at her. Then who? Marple gave no answer. Mrs. Lane cleared her throat. Her voice clipped, steady. Arthur must have written it. No one else handled parish funds. No one else had access to his papers. Slack glared at her. You typed the minutes. You held the cupboard keys. You fetched the jug. You had access to everything. She did not flinch. Her lips pressed thin. Clerical work requires access. It proves nothing. Haydock grunted. Too many coincidences, if you ask me. Victor Dale shifted uneasily. He scratched his neck again. Anyone could slip papers into a Bible. Even during service. It lies open most Sundays. But Slack shook his head. Not anyone. Only someone who knew where eyes wouldn't look. Someone careful. The villagers whispered sharper now. Forgery. Deception. Stains even holy pages. Cartwright slammed a fist on the chair. This clears me. He was guilty. He made me look bad with that false line. And all the time he was the thief. Marple's eyes stayed fixed on the cheque, her voice calm. Money does not explain the wire, nor the salt, nor the burn. Theft and death may link, but one does not erase the other. Slack paused. Her words sank deep. He turned the cheque in his hand. His pencil tapped against it. Forgery, or fraud. But who forged? Marple lifted her gaze. Her eyes rested on Mrs. Lane again. The secretary's fingers held her papers too tight, knuckles white, but her face stayed calm. Marple whispered soft. Hands that stitch neat also sign neat. Both habits. Both reveal. Dolly's breath caught. She looked from Marple to Lane, then back again. Marple whispered. This cheque was not Arthur's hand. Debt ties men tighter than rope. Inspector Slack turned sharp. Cartwright. Speak. What dealings did you have with Penrith? Cartwright's face flushed red, his big hands clenched. I won't deny it. I owed him. But debt's no crime. Gasps stirred the hall. Reverend Clement muttered. So it was true. Griselda shook her head. All that money, wasted in drink. Cartwright bristled. I borrowed for the pub roof. He lent me. He charged no interest. But he wanted favours, always reminding me. Slack pressed harder. Favours? What favours? Free ale. Quiet tabs. Names of men owing me. He used it against me. The villagers murmured. So he held him. A rope round his neck. Cartwright slammed the table. But I never killed him. My hands can't stitch ribbons. Look at them. He spread them wide. Callosed, cracked, fingers thick, clumsy. Those wires weren't mine. Haydock nodded slowly. He's right there. Wiring like that took skill. Thin hands. Patient work. Marple watched quietly. Her eyes flicked once to Mrs. Lane. Still calm. Still neat. Her papers squared as always. Slack frowned. Cartwright had cause. Cause enough for murder. Marple's voice came soft. Cause alone does not prove the hand. Dolly leaned close. Jane, you think she had steadier hands than him? Marple whispered back. Habits. Tell. His are loud. Hers are silent. The hall grew tense again. Cartwright's voice cracked. He ruined me. But I swear before God, I never touched those wires. Slack snapped his notebook shut. Maybe so, but debt's a heavy motive, and motives kill. Marple whispered low. Motives kill, but habits reveal the killer. Keys open more than doors. Inspector Slack rattled the parish cupboard. The lock turned smooth. Who keeps this key? He demanded. Mrs. Lane's voice answered quick. I do, always, for records, for supplies. Slack opened the door wide. Shelves lined neat, papers stacked, boxes labelled. On the lower shelf lay a reel of copper wire. Beside it, florist's wire. Next to them, a roll of insulating tape. Gasps broke out. Dolly clutched Marple's arm. Jane, the very tools. Slack lifted the spool. Dale, is this yours? Victor shook his head fast. No, Inspector. My wire's heavy gauge. For sockets. Lamps. This is fine. Thin. Work for hands with needle, not pliers. Slack turned to Lane. Well? She stood tall, her voice even. Arthur brought many things into that cupboard. Old stock. Odd scraps. I merely kept them tidy. Marple's eyes sharpened. Kept tidy. Yes. Always tidy. Dolly whispered low. She has a ready answer for everything. Haydock frowned. That tape's new, not scrap. Bought within weeks. Lane adjusted her papers. Her hands steady. Then the treasurer bought it. Not I. Slack's pencil scratched the notebook. Keys in your pocket. Tools in your cupboard. Wires in your ribbons. It narrows fast. The villagers murmured louder. She fetched the jug. She typed the minutes. She kept the keys. Always, her hand in everything. Cartwright growled. She framed me. That line in the minutes. She planted it. Victor's voice cracked. She used my trade to cover hers. Stitched wire neat. Blamed me for. Sockets. Lane's face stayed calm. Too calm. Her lips thin. Her eyes cold. Speculation. Nothing more. Marple folded her shawl. Her needles rested still. Her voice soft. Habits leave marks, Mrs. Lane, even when the hands stay steady. Slack slammed the cupboard shut. This is evidence. Until explained, it stays with me. The villagers leaned close, their whispers sharp. Some fearful, some angry, all eyes turning. Marple's gaze lingered on Lane's thin fingers. Precise, unshaken, the same hands that squared papers, the same hands that stitched death. Marple whispered, keys in her hand, and death followed the lock. Keys open more than doors. Inspector Slack rattled the Parish cupboard. The lock turned smooth. A faint click echoed in the hall. He pulled the door wide. Shelves stacked neat, boxes labelled in Lane's tidy hand. Files squared to edges, every corner precise. On the lower shelf lay a reel of copper wire, beside it florist's wire. Next to them, a roll of insulating tape. Nothing dusty, all recent. Gasps spread through the villagers. Dolly caught Marple's sleeve. "Jane, look." Tools for the trap. Slack held the spool high. "Dale, is this yours?" Victor shook his head fast. "No, Inspector. My spools are heavier. For sockets, lamps. That's embroidery wire. Too fine for my hands." Slack narrowed his eyes. "Mrs. Lane?" She stood tall, face calm. "I tidy the cupboard each month. Anything left goes inside. Arthur often dropped scraps. I only kept order." Marple's eyes lifted. "Always tidy, always in control." Dolly whispered sharp. "She has an answer for everything." Haydock bent low. He fingered the tape. "Not old. Bought within weeks. New smell. Fresh cut." Lane replied quick. "Then Arthur bought it. Not I." Slack scribbled notes. "Keys in your pocket, supplies in your cupboard. Decorations in your hands. Too much in common." The villagers stirred. Whispers circled. She typed the minutes. She fetched the jug. She kept the keys. She touched everything. Cartwright's face burned red. "She framed me, that false line about the loan. Now this." She set the stage. Victor raised his voice, desperate. "She used my trade to shield hers. I saw the stitch. That was needlework, not pliers." Slack lifted the spool again. Fine copper, threaded like lace. It wasn't tied, it was sewn. Marple's gaze fixed on Lane's thin fingers. Precise, unhurried. The same fingers that squared papers. The same that folded minutes without error. The same that touched the velvet hem. Dolly whispered, "Jane, do you believe it's her?" Marple answered soft, "I believe habits write truth more than words do." Lane's lips pressed thin, her eyes cold. She said nothing. Slack slammed the cupboard shut. The sound cracked. "This stays sealed. Evidence now. Evidence with a key in one hand." The villagers leaned close, their voices sharp. Always neat. Always calm. Always holding the keys. Marple folded her shawl across her lap. Her mind set the pieces in place. Thread hidden. Salt circle. Scorched ring. Forged line. And now, the cupboard key. The habit of tidying. The habit of control. The habit that stitched death. Marple whispered low, keys in her hand, and death unlocked with them. Habits reveal killers. Miss Marple sat still, her hands folded on her shawl, her eyes calm but sharp. Inspector Slack frowned. "Well, Miss Marple, what do you make of it?" She spoke soft. "Habits tell more than words. Always." Dolly leaned close. "Habits? What habits?" Marple's eyes rested on Mrs. Lane. "She types minutes twice. One for the record, one for herself. Never once a slip. Except tonight. A line too neat to be chance." The villagers murmured. Griselda gasped. "She does indeed. Always perfect." Marple continued. "She keeps cupboards tidy. No dust. No disorder. Keys always in her pocket. Even the reel of copper placed neat, not hidden." Slack waved a hand. "Plenty of women keep order." Marple shook her head. "Not all sew wire into velvet hems. Not all stitch copper like thread." Victor raised his voice. "She stitched it. I know the work. That wasn't rough wiring. That was needlework. Fine, patient. Lane's face remained calm, her lips thin. Speculation, nothing more. I typed. I tidied. I stitched. But only for service, never for death. Marple's voice stayed low. Habits cannot change overnight. The same hands that fold papers neat, that sew hems exact, that add one false line, also stitched copper thread. Dolly whispered, frightened. She's right, Jane. She never leaves things messy, always exact. Haydock folded his arms, and she fetched the jug, always her hand in each step. Slack tapped his notebook. Prove it, Miss Marple. Show one habit that convicts her. Marple's eyes narrowed. She pricks no finger when she sews. Years of skill. But I, touching the hem once, bled at once. Only practiced hands stitch so neat. The villagers gasped again. Eyes turned to Lane. Her posture stiffened, but her face did not change. Cartwright growled. She framed me. And you still doubt? Look at her, calm as ice. Slack hesitated. His pencil hovered. Lane's calm unnerved even him. Marple leaned forward slightly. Habits, Inspector. They repeat. They expose. Paper forged neat. Wire stitched neat. Cupboard arranged neat. Death arranged neat. Only one hand fits. The silence deepened. Even the air felt still. Lane's fingers clenched her papers. Just once, then relaxed. Dolly shivered. She can't deny it. It's her. It must be. Slack's jaw tightened. He snapped his notebook shut. Then we have our proof. Marple's gaze never left Lane, her voice steady. Only one person stitched this trap. Lane's lips curved faintly, and she whispered, but I was not alone. Trust dies faster than men. Inspector Slack faced the hall, his notebook shut, his voice firm. Miss Marple, lay it out, step by step. Marple inclined her head, her voice soft but clear. Salt water placed round the table. A trap, not a spill. Copper wire stitched inside ribbon. Hidden. Precise. The wire led to the radiator valve. The current carried through the brine. Into Arthur's shoes. Into his ring. His palm bore the burn. His ring bore the scorch. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Griselda clutched the Reverend's arm. Dolly whispered, so dreadful, so exact. Marple went on. The jug carried bitter powder, enough to weaken him, to confuse his steps. Then the current struck. Quick, silent, certain. No chance to cry out. Slack nodded once. And who arranged all this? Marple's gaze rested on Mrs. Lane. The same hands that typed false lines, the same that tidied cupboards, the same that stitched copper neat as thread. Mrs. Lane. All eyes turned. The villagers held breath. Some whispered prayers. Some muttered. Always calm. Always her. Lane stood. Her papers clutched. Her face pale but lips steady. Yes, I did it. I stitched it. I planned it. The hall erupted. Gasps, cries, shouts. God save us. Murder in our trust. Slack raised his hand. Quiet. Lane's voice cut through. He threatened me. Arthur threatened to expose me. He meant to shame me before you all. He held my letters. He blackmailed me. I would not let him. Her tone sharpened. I called it justice. Justice for the trust. Justice for my name. He was greedy, corrupt. I saved you from him. Cartwright snarled. You killed to save yourself. Don't dress it as justice. Haydock shook his head. Murder's never justice. Only pride. Marple's voice remained mild. Pride drives many hands, but pride leaves habits. Those habits betray. Lane's eyes flicked to Marple. Cold. Hard. You speak as if you never erred, but you watch too much. One day you'll find watching costs more than silence. Dolly clutched Marple's arm. Don't listen, Jane. Don't. Slack stepped forward. You admit you set the trap. Lane lifted her chin. I admit it, and I do not repent. He meant to ruin me. I could not allow it. The room trembled with whispers. The Reverend bowed his head. Griselda sobbed quietly. Marple studied Lane in silence. Her shawl pulled close, her needles still. Only her eyes moved, watching. Lane turned back to the crowd, her voice lower now. You think it ends with me, but it does not, Lane whispered. I wasn't the only one. Respectability is the cleverest mask. The hall emptied slow. Whispers lingered in corners. Chairs scraped, footsteps shuffled. But no laughter, no warmth. Dolly walked close beside Marple, her face pale, her voice shook. Jane. I trusted her. All these years, I let her pour my tea, carry my purse, open my cupboards, and all the while, Marple pressed her arm. Appearances deceived Dolly. Calm faces often hide sharp hands. Slack closed his notebook with a snap, his voice gruff. You were right, Miss Marple. I doubted, and still you were right. It was her neatness, her blasted neatness that betrayed her. Marple nodded once. Habits speak louder than words, Inspector. Always. Haydock adjusted his coat, his face grave. She called it justice. I call it pride. Pride that dressed itself in service. The Reverend bowed his head. Even in sacred duty, sin can hide. Cartwright muttered. She framed me. Made me look thief, clever witch. And we all believed her. His voice cracked. Every pint I pulled for her will sour in my memory. Griselda whispered low. How could she sit among us, smile with us, and plan murder in stitches? Dolly shook her head. It chills me. We think we know our neighbors. We never do. Marple's voice stayed calm. Every village hides shadows, and every shadow comes from ordinary light. That is why we must watch the small things. Habits, patterns, repeated gestures. They never lie. Slack gave a short nod. You've the eye, Miss Marple. More than half my men put together. She smiled faintly. Not I, Inspector. Just attention. Attention to the details others pass over. Dolly sighed. Her hands trembled as she held her gloves. Trust broken is worse than theft. It leaves nothing safe. Marple agreed softly. Yes, trust once cracked cannot be mended with words. The last villagers drifted into the night. The door closed. Silence settled. Marple sat back in her chair, her shawl wrapped firm, her needles rested. Her thoughts turned. Pride, greed, control. Ordinary traits twisted sharp. Habits made weapons. Even velvet cloth became a snare. She whispered to herself. Respectability was her mask, precision her weapon, and pride her downfall. Dolly shivered again. Jane, it's over now, isn't it? Marple's eyes lowered, her lips curved faintly. No, Dolly. It never ends. It only waits. A knock broke the silence. Soft. On wood. The vicarage door creaked. Marple bent, lifted a folded paper from the mat. Her hand opened it slow. The words neat, written in fine script. The note read, Another ribbon waits.